Welcome to the Young Turks. Cenk, Uygur, and Kasparian on a historic day in America. The Brett Kavanaugh hearings are, in a word, unbelievable. And man, we got more than we bargained for, and we had bargained for a lot. So we have been covering it all day long for you guys. Live play-by-play, that's what we do with all the major events, State of the Unions, the debates, the primary coverages, etc. And so, we had all of our different hosts, including myself, Anna, Ben, John, Brett, etc. Adrienne Lawrence, a legal analyst who's one of her specialties, sexual misconduct cases. All of us were in and covered it throughout the day. There was dramatic testimony on both sides. I want to take a note, as usual, here to pause and thank our members for allowing all of this to happen, because we couldn't do it without you guys. It's a major production, and it's not easy to put together with a limited staff that we have. And by the way, if you're a member and you want to do more, and you guys have been awesome in asking us, can you do more? So we created tyt.com/yes. So if those are just for one-time donations, and if you want to support what we're doing at the Young Turks and you want to make that happen, that would be amazing. Thank you for thinking of that and asking us in your emails about that. It's tyt.com/yes, and obviously to become a member, it's tyt.com/join. And if you are a member, don't forget, you can go back and watch all the testimony, the amazing parts. You could fast forward to the Lindsey Graham, Dick Durbin, both of their statements, opening statements, all the best parts. We're gonna cover a lot of that for you guys here in the next 2 hours as well. Before we get started with all the details, and we do have amazing videos for you, we're gonna break it all down. What happened, and then the reactions, okay? And again, if you miss any part of this show, if you're a member, don't worry about it, you can get it anytime. Okay, so just a quick summary here, because last I was on air, I'd covered 3 hours in the beginning of the day with Blasey Ford's testimony, okay? Having watched Kavanaugh's opening statement, it looked like after Blasey Ford's testimony, it was over. And but I actually think, and we'll talk more about the overall summary at the end here, so stay with us throughout all this. I think he put himself back in the ball game, and he did it in a fascinating and risky way. And I think that I'm sure that will be great disagreement about that. But I think there is one issue that is the end of them, and that they cannot get past. And it is the one that Anna has been saying from day one over and over again. They refuse an FBI investigation. Now the Democrats have said just a 1-week investigation. Well, that's not gonna delay it past the midterms. That's not gonna do it. It's not gonna affect midterms or politics at all. To say no to that, it's dispositive. And one side deeply wants you to know what all the facts are, and the other side does not. So as much as you might have, if you're a Republican or an independent, or if you only saw Kavanaugh's testimony, as much as you might have been riveted by that or emotionally touched by that. And I have to be honest, and we'll talk more about it when we get to it, I was touched by some parts of it, and I thought one part was actually particularly effective. But at the end of the day, one side wants to know more, and the other side, who has been devastated, their name has been devastated by these charges, does not want a further investigation. That is super relevant.
It is also relevant when you take Kavanaugh's opening statement into consideration. I think that it's important to be as truthful as humanly possible when you are testifying, obviously. And during his testimony, he specifically said that he is ready and willing to undergo the FBI investigation. So then why didn't the FBI investigation take place?
Yeah.
It appears that he is not ready and willing. Senate Republicans, especially the Republicans in the Senate Judiciary Committee, are not willing to do the investigation, and I think that speaks volumes. And later on in the show, we are going to show you an incredible interaction between Senator Dick Durbin and Kavanaugh in regard to the FBI investigation, and I think that it shows everyone a lot. Regarding what the Republicans are really willing to do and what they're not willing to do to prove his innocence.
So now that we've caught you up on where things are in a quick, rough way, now let's go back and give you all of it, starting with Dr. Blasey's testimony.
All right. The special hearing involving Dr. Blasey Ford's allegations of sexual misconduct done by Brett Kavanaugh back in the 1980s began with Ford's testimony, and the testimony was powerful to say the least, and that's not just based on my perception of it. Many Republican lawmakers responded to it by calling it credible, and we will get to their statements in just a moment. But before we do so, I would like to show you a few portions of her testimony that really stood out. So let's start with Ford detailing the sexual assault allegations.
I went up a very narrow set of stairs leading from the living room to a second floor to use the restroom. When I got to the top of the stairs, I was pushed from behind into a bedroom across from the bathroom. I couldn't see who pushed me. Brett and Mark came into the bedroom and locked the door behind them. There was music playing in the bedroom. It was turned up louder by either Brett or Mark once we were in the room. I was pushed onto the bed, and Brett got on top of me. He began running his hands over my body and grinding into me. I yelled, hoping that someone downstairs might hear me, and I tried to get away from him, but his weight was heavy. Brett groped me and tried to take off my clothes. He had a hard time because he was very inebriated, and because I was wearing a one-piece bathing suit underneath my clothing. I believed he was going to rape me. I tried to yell for help. When I did, Brett put his hand over my mouth to stop me from yelling. This is what terrified me the most and has had the most lasting impact on my life. It was hard for me to breathe, and I thought that Brett was accidentally going to kill me. Both Brett and Mark were drunkenly laughing during the attack. They seemed to be having a very good time. Mark came over and jumped on the bed twice while Brett was on top of me. And the last time that he did this, we toppled over and Brett was no longer on top of me. I was able to get up and run out of the room.
So her allegations were very detailed. As we all know, there are certain parts of her allegations that are murky in detail because she doesn't remember. So for instance, the exact location or the exact date, she doesn't remember. But in terms of the physical assault itself, she was very detailed and as you can tell, emotional as she was recounting what happened to her.
There was plenty of tears on both sides. Kavanaugh showed a lot of emotion in his testimony as well, but it was a different kind of emotion, largely driven by anger and to be fair, sadness too. But in Dr. Ford's case, she teared up on a number of occasions, and understandably so, in describing this traumatic incident. The two parts I think that got to a lot of people were the understandably so again, the covering her mouth and the laughter throughout. And Anna's right. We were covering it live, and it struck me and John, me and Ben as we were watching it, that it was very, very credible. And then we checked online to see what other people were saying about it, but even Fox News analysts were like, Napolitano, 100% credible. And so she clearly went through this. And in fact, it was so credible that it appears the Republicans, including Judge Kavanaugh in his testimony, have given up the idea that this didn't happen to her.
Right.
So they're resorting only to mistaken identity at this point.
Exactly. And we're gonna come back to the whole notion of mistaken identity in just a moment because Blasey Ford did address that. But before we do so, I wanna give you one other portion of her testimony or her opening statement because she highlighted something that she went through with her husband that struck a chord with me and I think struck a chord with a lot of women who have gone through anything traumatic in the past. So let's take a look at the video and I'll fill in the blanks for you guys.
The reason this came up in counseling is that my husband and I had completed a very extensive, very long remodel of our home, and I insisted on a second front door. an idea that he and others disagreed with and could not understand. In explaining why I wanted a second front door, I began to describe the assault in detail. I recall saying that the boy who assaulted me could someday be on the U.S. Supreme Court, and spoke a bit about his background at an elitist all-boys school in Bethesda, Maryland. My husband recalls that I named my attacker as Brett Kavanaugh.
So, in the allegations, she claims that she was able to escape the attempted rape when Mark Judge kind of jumped on top of them. They toppled over. She was able to run and lock herself into a bathroom and then wait until she felt like it was safe for her to run out and then run out of the house for safety. And so the whole thing about the two front doors, that's an escape route. You know, that is an escape in case something traumatic happens to her again. And so if your husband is unaware of what you went through in the past, yeah, it's very strange to ask for two front doors. And so that's how it naturally came up in couples counseling. And it struck a chord with me because, I know from personal experience, when I've gone through something, difficult or traumatic, you start wanting irrational things to protect yourself. And I've had similar arguments with my husband about things where he doesn't understand. He's like, why are you being irrational right now? And so that really struck a chord with me personally.
Yeah, I think that was one of the key details that really sounded very, very credible, because why would anybody want two front doors? And that's why it came up in couples therapy in the first place, and that's the main corroborating note that we have from that therapy session where she talked about this assault. But what was chilling to me was knowing that she was chased out of that home anyway. So she needed an escape hatch, basically two escape hatches out of her own house because of the trauma of the past. And zealots threatened her so aggressively that they had to leave their home after people found out her identity. And to me, man, that's terribly symbolic. And so, like we said, after this, there just wasn't much to question her on. And the prosecutor that the Republicans brought in kept on asking about details, and all the details matched. I don't think that it was so, if they were trying to question her credibility, it was so ineffective that by the end, I was wondering if that was the intention at all, that perhaps the prosecutor just wanted to lay out all the facts, and if they matched, they matched, and they did. So there was almost nothing at all throughout the day to question any of her stories or credibility. The tiniest little thing was about how she was afraid of planes but took a bunch of planes rides anyway.
That's called life.
That's right. I have a family member who's afraid of flying, and he flies because he has to. Right? How else are you going to get from one part of the country or the world to the other? So
exactly.
At the end of the day, super credible, and the prosecutor, if anything, might have even helped her cause.
I think the prosecutor did help her cause unwittingly. And to give you an example of an exchange Mitchell, the prosecutor, had with Dr. Blasey Ford that I found fascinating was when not only was she trying to poke holes in the testimony, but she was also trying to figure out or make the case that this is a politically motivated attack on Kavanaugh. And so one example was the issue of the polygraph test. And so the prosecutor kept mentioning the polygraph test and kept trying to figure out, did Democrats pay for the polygraph test? Who encouraged you to take the polygraph test? Finally, after a line of questioning, both attorneys for Dr. Blasey Ford jumped in and they're like, let's just cut to the chase, okay? We asked her to go take the polygraph test. Okay, so there was that. And then there was one other part of the polygraph test that I thought was interesting. So Dr. Blasey Ford took the test in Baltimore, and the prosecutor asked her, that's interesting, so you live in California, why'd you go to Baltimore to take this test? And Dr. Blasey Ford responded by saying, well, my grandmother died, it was my grandmother's funeral, and so the person who conducted the polygraph test was kind enough to meet me in Baltimore so we can conduct it there.
And everyone's like, oh, Okay.
It was
that
a very
totally explains it.
It was a very awkward moment for the prosecutor.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so then we're left with, okay, it's clear that this happened to her, and even Judge Kavanaugh in his opening testimony twice said that he does not dispute that at all. So, well, then, are you sure that it was Kavanaugh? So they asked that question. Let's take a look at the next video to see what the answer is.
Last night, the Republican staff of this committee released to the media a timeline that shows that they've interviewed 2 people who claim they were the ones who actually assaulted you. I'm asking you to address this new defense of mistaken identity directly. Dr. Ford, with what degree of certainty do you believe Brett Kavanaugh assaulted you?
100%.
100%.
Yeah. So, look, I don't know who these 2 guys are that who volunteers to say, yeah, I'm the one who did the sexual assault 36 years ago, let alone 2 of them.
Right.
They can't both be right. So now, what does that lead me to? A conclusion about who's right and who's wrong? No. That leads me to, for God's sake, let the FBI investigate.
Yes.
Okay, so he was super emotional about how it wasn't him. She is very clear that it was him. Why don't you have the FBI, who are trained professionals, nonpartisan, ask the 2 guys, ask the other witnesses, ask everybody. It doesn't, and the Republicans keep falling back on the FBI does not make conclusions. Nobody's asking for a conclusion. We're asking for more evidence, because in a best case scenario for Kavanaugh, it is unclear. In a best case scenario. So if it's unclear, we need more evidence. Who would be against the FBI asking the 2 guys who raised their hand and said, it was me, that they sexually assaulted Blasey Ford? How could you possibly be against that? That might prove your case entirely and we might be done with it.
You would be against it if you know that you are guilty of wrongdoing. Because I know for a fact that anyone who is adamant and certain that they're innocent would want further investigation to at least clear their name, right? Because even if he gets confirmed without the FBI investigation, you have a huge portion of the country under the impression that you might have attempted to rape someone when you were 17 years old. And I would not want the burden of having my reputation destroyed like that. I would want my name cleared, and I would want a nonpartisan FBI investigation. And by the way, when Republicans mention that this is not done, FBI doesn't come up with conclusions, they know what they're doing, right? They're trying to make it seem as though this is unprecedented, the FBI shouldn't be involved, the FBI's never been involved in situations like this. No, they're not handing down a conviction. They're doing a more extensive background check to see if there's any validity to these allegations. And by the way, this is just allegations for one person. There have been multiple accusers at this point. Are any of those other accusers going to be part of any type of hearing? Are Republicans still going to rush to vote on Kavanaugh tomorrow?
Yeah, it seems at this point unconscionable. And a lot of the Republicans showed anger, especially Lindsey Graham, I can't believe what the Democrats are doing. Well, then for God's sake, prove them wrong. Because if you can prove them wrong, I'll be angry with you. The great majority of the country will be angry with you. Because if these charges are false and done on purpose, my God, everybody will be in a rage at what has happened to Kavanaugh. Wouldn't you want that to A, clear his name, and by the way, B, to help you politically? I mean, it makes no sense to turn. Look, guys, the last thing was the length of the investigation, because the Republicans could have made a credible case while the Democrats are trying to delay this vote past the election in the hopes that they win the election and block Kavanaugh. But if the FBI, now the Democrats say, no, we just want a 1-week investigation of the FBI. In fact, in the same exact situation with Clarence Thomas and Anita Hill, it only took 4 days. So now the Republicans have no excuse left. You have a person here in Blasey Ford who's, by their own admission, clearly credible. Kavanaugh admits it probably happened to her. You think it's mistaken identity. You've got all these other witnesses on other situations, and in this one, and you have the FBI, and it can be done in a week, well before the elections. There's no reason at all to say, don't investigate. Again, as Anna said, unless you're afraid of what they're gonna find.
My God, they hired a professional prosecutor, a lifelong Republican, to poke holes in her testimony, and she failed at it miserably. please have the investigation. Just have the investigation. They're afraid of what they're gonna find. Okay, we gotta take a break. When we come back, we are going to get reaction from Republican lawmakers in regard to Dr. Blasey Ford's testimony. And there are some Fox News analysts who wanted to weigh in on her credibility. So we'll talk about that.
Yeah, and don't miss Kavanaugh's testimony, because we gotta be fair. We gotta show you what he said. And I'll tell you the part that actually I thought was surprisingly persuasive. So we'll share that with you a little bit later. We hope you're enjoying this free clip from the Young Turks. If you want to get the whole show and more exclusive content while supporting independent media, become a member at tyt.com/join today. In the meantime, enjoy this free segment. All right, back on the Young Turks, Cenk and Anna with you guys. First, member comments, and there's a lot of disagreement over Kavanaugh's emotions and what it means. Tara Moth wrote in, I find it interesting that people behind her are less emotional than those who were behind Kavanaugh when the wimp was crying. Pathological liars always start crying when they're caught in their lies. I don't know that I agree with you. I think that there's many different reasons why somebody can get emotional. It could be it's because they're telling the truth. It could be because they're lying. I don't know. Could be just the incredible stress of the situation and the raw emotions. Tim says, this is painful to watch. During Ford's hearing, I was convinced the Republicans would obviously be forced to change course since she was so credible and believable. Now it doesn't look like they will. Deeply frustrating. I'm deeply worried about this democracy.
Can I jump in for a second? To be honest, what I did see from some Republicans, certainly not all, was after Dr. Blasey Ford's testimony, some of them did change course. It wasn't until after Brett Kavanaugh's opening statement that I feel like they went back and really doubled down in supporting him.
Yeah, and Judge Napolitano had said something relevant about that too. We're gonna get to that a little bit later. Last one, Neurological on Twitter says props to TYT for stepping up their coverage skills this year in an attempt to keep up with the crazy speed of news lately. Thank you so much. We appreciate you, and we appreciate you guys. Again, it's really important. We can't do it without you guys. tyt.com/join to become a member to make this possible, and then you get all the coverage anytime you want, including the full day's coverage. You can go back and watch it. And then if you're already a member and you want to help out in any way, even in tiny ways, tyt.com/yes to just give some money to support the efforts that we've been doing here. But I just heard we were double streaming. We were covering the end of the hearings still going on our Facebook page, but we're gonna bring it here to the live show. So let's watch a little bit more, see where they are in the hearings, because they're not quite done yet. We anticipated they would be, but they aren't, so let's watch. Okay, I think we're gonna go to it. Okay, guys, they're working obviously on trying to put together the footage here.
Right.
Okay, apparently it's not quite ready yet. As soon as it's ready, we'll go to it. But let's keep going. Oh, you know what? In fact, let me just read two more comments here. Riley Cool says, a man can get emotional, cry, scream, and puke all he wants. Never would a woman be allowed to express that. There's so much fascinating disagreement on the emotion here. And then Kika Rasu on Twitter says, if even one Democrat votes to confirm this sexual predator, I can't even tell you what sort of horrific storm they're going to bring down upon themselves and the party. It's interesting because Lindsey Graham made the exact opposite threat to the Republicans, saying, now one of you better vote against him, otherwise there's going to be hell to pay.
Yeah, Lindsey Graham lost it during the hearings, and we have some footage of that to show you guys. But he later had to apologize and said, sorry, emotions run high. But his behavior was beyond uncalled for, and he knows it too, which is why he apologized. We'll talk about that a little later.
I have controversial opinions on that, but all right, we're going to get to that in a minute. All right.
Okay.
Until we can get the stream going, let's keep going on our coverage.
Okay, great. Just a note to the director: we're likely to go to video 11 in this story, so just have that ready, please. All right. Following the testimony, the opening statement given by Dr. Blasey Ford in today's hearings, there were a number of reactions from Republican lawmakers that were fascinating and honestly unexpected given the partisan politics that play a role in this whole debacle. Now, there were Republicans who said, yeah, this her testimony is absolutely credible. For example, there was Senator Richard Shelby from Alabama. Richard Shelby, the chairman of the Senate Appropriations Committee, called Christine Blasey Ford's testimony on Thursday credible. He said, quote, "I thought the prosecutor looked like she knew what she was doing. I don't know how it plays out. I said, let's see how this process works." Now, that was a statement specifically about the prosecutor in this case. But the prosecutor, by her own admission, by the way, was unable to poke any holes in Dr. Blasey Ford's testimony. Toward the end of the questioning, she made it clear that, it's these 5-minute intervals of questioning that make it very difficult for me to do what I'm supposed to do. And that was essentially an admission of failing to find any holes in the story that Blasey Ford was sharing with her. So there's that. Also, there was Orrin Hatch. So Orrin Hatch attempted to comment on how credible the testimony was. However, he used wording that some found controversial. When reporters asked Hatch to elaborate on what he meant by attractive and good witness, his aides essentially said attractive meant attractive testimony, not her physical appearance. He said she seems very sincere, but in terms about her and Kavanaugh, I don't really know any more other than she can't remember how she got there and how she left, and that's according to Lindsey Graham. That is not Orrin Hatch's comments.
To me, I know there's a controversy around Orrin Hatch calling her attractive and pleasing was his explanation of what he meant by attractive, and people are really upset about that because they think, especially for a sexual assault survivor, those are not the right words to use. To me, the more relevant part as to whether he found her believable or not is he said, "I didn't find her uncredible."
Right.
So in other words, even Orrin Hatch, who when the hearings began was the most vituperative against her and had said all the charges are phony. And when asked how he knew that, he said, "I just know," okay? Comes out and says basically, yeah, she was credible. So again, the idea of questioning whether this happened to her is pretty much done at this point. Only kooks on Fox News and on social media are still talking about how she's lying or, in the words of one of them, a skank. Oy, right?
I know.
But the Republicans in Kavanaugh have said, no mas, we don't dispute this happened to her.
Exactly, and so there was also an interesting thing that happened with Senator Lindsey Graham following Dr. Blasey Ford's testimony. This is when they finally went to recess, and so Lindsey Graham was approached by reporters, and he seemed to belittle her testimony. He seemed to say that he didn't really believe her. Now, let me give you one of those quotes. "Unless something new comes forward, you have just an emotional accusation and an emotional denial without corroboration." And then he was approached by someone who identified herself as a rape victim. And according to reporters, this woman just told Lindsey Graham that she was raped. He said as he headed into an elevator, "I'm sorry, tell the cops."
That does not seem like a particularly caring response. For God's sake, take a minute to just, give a proper response and then move on. But Lindsey Graham full of a lot of anger today, as he just showed later in the testimony. But Kavanaugh's testimony is a different question. But Blasey Ford's testimony was pretty much as good as her supporters could have asked for in terms of making her case, and watching her and hearing her makes a huge difference. It's way more effective than seeing it in cold print in front of you. It's one thing to see the quotes, it's another thing to see and connect to a human being telling a story. And it was so powerful, it broke through even to the Republicans. Now they might not vote in the right direction anyway. They might vote for Kavanaugh, even if they believed her. And I guess they're gonna hang their hat on, yeah, she's definitely telling the truth about everything except that it was Kavanaugh. But overall, she was an excellent witness.
Finally, I want to go to Karl Rove's reaction because he decided to torch the GOP over this. And I thought that was fascinating. So let's take a quick look at that.
Well, we saw an emotional and credible witness. We saw Miss Mitchell, the designated questioner by the Republicans. She kept the Republicans out of trouble by not having 10 men line up to confront this woman claiming to be the victim of a horrific sexual abuse. But on the other hand, she didn't put Dr. Ford in much difficulty herself until the very end. I think the point that she made at the end that there are 4 other people, 3 men, Kavanaugh, Judge PJ, and a good friend of yours now, Leland Kaiser. Those are the 4 people you remember being there. They don't confirm, corroborate what you had to say. The Democrats want this as a talking point. They could have handled this in July and August by turning it over to the FBI and having everybody interviewed confidentially and sharing that among the staff and make a decision. But now that it's become public and it was deliberately made public, probably by a staff member for Dianne Feinstein, this thing has become a Democrat cause celebre. It helps them with the electorate. It keeps the focus on something they want. And if they succeed in delaying it, so much the better. But even if they don't, they occupy valuable space in the weeks leading up to the midterm election.
So he's making commentary on 2 things there. One is, we're screwed because she was totally credible. And the Republicans could not damage her. It is Karl Rove, after all, right? Mm-hmm. And then he makes commentary on how they're in trouble politically because now the Democrats are going to use this. But Karl, you just said that she was very credible. Then you bemoan the fact that they're going to say that Kavanaugh should not be on the Supreme Court because he might have attempted rape. Mm-hmm. But Rove sees that as only through a political lens.
That's right. I think that's the problem. I think that right now both sides, it appears, see this through a political lens. And I wish that it wasn't the case. Like, I wish that we focused on what's being alleged, the importance of ensuring that someone who could have done this doesn't end up being a Supreme Court justice, right? Like, I think about it in terms of how would I feel if, Democrats are in charge, we have a Democratic lawmaker, let's say Bernie Sanders in an ideal world is the president of the United States, and he nominates someone who has similar allegations against him. Like, take politics out of it. I want an FBI investigation immediately. I don't care if Bernie Sanders is the president. I don't care if the Supreme Court justice is a progressive. What I care about is justice. You can't have a potential criminal being a Supreme Court justice.
There's 100 million other progressives in the country. We can just pick another one, right? So if the person actually did it, and that's the huge if here. Mm-hmm. But last thing here, Karl Rove, remember, worked with Kavanaugh. They worked together in the Bush administration. He was in a lot of ways a mentor to Kavanaugh. Kavanaugh is a deeply political figure from day one. So that's why it's unsurprising that Karl Rove in that case would be mad at the Republicans for not being able to question Blasey Ford's credibility, even though he acknowledges there that she is credible. It's a classic Karl Rove complaint. Mm-hmm. Why didn't we rip her apart even though we know she's telling the truth? Look, that's my interpretation. You saw the video yourself. You can interpret it any way you like. But the bottom line is, it's obvious even Karl Rove thought that she appeared very credible, and that's why he's mad at the Republicans. Okay, can we go to the hearing now? Yes, so let's go to the hearing and take a look.
So I'm gonna ask you one last time. Are you willing to ask the White House to authorize the FBI to investigate the claims that have been made against you?
Well, I'll do whatever the committee wants, of course.
And I've heard you say that, but I've not heard you answer a very specific question that's been asked, which is, are you willing to ask the White House to conduct an investigation by the FBI to get to whatever you believe is the bottom of the allegations that have been levied against you?
The FBI would gather witness statements. You have the witness statements. I
don't want to debate with you how they do their business. I'm just asking, are you willing to ask the White House to conduct such an investigation? Because as you are aware, the FBI did conduct a background investigation into you before we were aware of these most recent allegations. So are you willing to ask the White House to do that? And say yes or no, and then we can move on.
I've had 6 background investigations over 26 years.
Sir, as it relates to the recent allegations, are you willing to have them do it?
The witness testimony is before you. No witness who was there supports that I was there.
Okay, I'm going to take that as a no, and we can move on. You have said in your opening statement, you characterized these allegations as a conspiracy directed against you. I'll point out to you that Justice now, Neil Gorsuch, was nominated by this president. He was considered by this body just last year. I did a rough kind of analysis of similarities. You both attended Georgetown Prep. You both attended very prestigious law schools. You both clerked for Justice Kennedy. You were both circuit judges. You were both nominated to the Supreme Court. You were both questioned about your record. The only difference is that you have been accused of sexual assault. How do you reconcile your statement about a conspiracy against you with the treatment of someone who was before this body not very long ago?
I explained that in my opening statement, Senator. Look at the evidence here, the calendars, look at the witness statements, look at Ms. Kaiser's statement.
Okay. And then, do you agree that it is possible for men to both be friends with some women and treat other women badly?
Of course, but the point I've been emphasizing, and that is if you go back to age 14 for me, you will find people, and not just people, lots of people who I've been friends with, some of whom are in this room today, starting at age 14, women, and who talked about my friendships with them through my whole life, and it's a consistent pattern all the way through. 65 women who knew me more than 35 years ago signed a letter to support me after the allegation was made because they know me and they were with me and we grew up together. We talked on the phone together and we went to events together.
She's got a bit of too much of a skeptical look on her face.
Is who I am.
I'm fine with it.
What they've said, what the people who worked with me in the Bush White House,
the
women there.
Yeah, she's a prosecutor.
Yeah, she's very good at it.
CentralMaine.com. Look at what the law clerks. I have sent more women law clerks to the Supreme Court than any other federal judge in the country.
I only have a few seconds left, and I'll just ask you a direct question. Did you watch Dr. Ford's testimony?
I did not. I planned to. I planned
Thank you.
I planned to, but I did not. I was preparing mine.
Wow,
Our
that is
last
an
5
interesting
minutes
question.
will be
That was a great
Senator
question.
Flake, 1 minute,
Yeah,
and Senator Kennedy, 4 minutes.
and I
Thank you,
get
Mr.
that he
Chairman.
was busy. He
When
was
Dr.
preparing
Ford
his
came forward
testimony,
with
but
her,
I really, if I was in his
account,
shoes, would have want to watch that
immediately said
testimony.
that she
Right.
should be heard.
I mean, that's
And,
one way of
asked the
preparing
chairman
for
to
your
delay
testimony.
the vote that we had scheduled. And the chairman did, and I appreciate that. And she came at great difficulty for her and offered compelling testimony. You have come and done the same. I am sorry for what's happened to you and your family, as I'm sorry for what has happened to hers. And this is not a good process, but it's all we've got. And I would just urge my colleagues to recognize that in the end, we are 21 very imperfect senators trying to do our best to provide advice and consent.
Well, the first part
And
of
in
that
the
was
end, there's
honest.
likely to be as much doubt as certainty going out of this room today. And that as we make decisions going forward, I hope that people will recognize that. And in the rhetoric that we use and the language that we use going forward, that we'll recognize that there is doubt. We'll never move beyond that. And just have a little humility on that front. So thank you.
Thank you, Senator Flake. Now, Senator Kennedy.
Flake's whole thing is, I'm the reasonable one. Now, at the end of the day, the vote is what matters. He's got to
I'm
stop
sorry,
scrunching
Judge.
his nose, by the way.
He
what
really
you and your
does.
family have been through. And I'm sorry for what Dr. Ford and her family have been through. It could have been avoided.
Not really. Even if they came forward earlier, you would
Do you
have had
believe in
to
God?
go through this.
do.
process. Oh, please.
Do you believe in God?
Yeah.
I'm going to give you a last opportunity. We're right here, right in front of God and country. I want you to look me in the eye.
Oh, wow, this will do it.
Are Dr. Ford's allegations true?
They're not accurate as to me. I have not questioned that she might have been sexually assaulted at some point in her life by someone, someplace. But as to me, I've never done this. Never done this to her or to anyone else. And I've talked to you about what I was doing that summer of 1982, but I'm telling you, I've never done this to anyone, including her.
Are Ms. Ramirez's allegations about you true?
Those are not. None of the witnesses in the room support that. If that had happened, that would have been the talk of campus in our freshman dorm. The New York Times reported that as recently as last week.
I like how Kennedy's squinting to see if he can tell the truth of his statements.
Well, I'm not going to characterize it, but calling classmates last week and just seemed very, I'll just stop there. But it's not true. It's not true.
Are Ms. Swetnick's allegations made by Mr. Avenatti about you true?
Those are not true. Never met her. Don't know who she is. There's a letter released within 2 hours of that breaking yesterday from, I think, 60 people who knew me in high school, men and women, who said it was, their words, nonsense, totally, the whole thing, that's totally ridiculous.
None of these allegations are true?
Correct.
No doubt in your mind?
Zero. I'm 100% certain.
Not even a scintilla?
Not a scintilla. 100% certain, Senator.
You swear to God?
I swear to God.
Oh, wow, he did it twice.
That's all I have, Judge.
Judge Kavanaugh, thank you very much. Hearing adjourned.
Okay, all right. So, John Kennedy's last questions there, Republican senator from Louisiana, in a way accidentally summarized the absurdity of today. These incredibly old senators, and that's only relevant in that it is emblematic of the decrepit power structure in our country.
Absolutely.
Like hanging on to power for dear life. Go to these antiquated things like, now do you swear to God? Yeah, the guy swore to God 1,000 times. That doesn't prove anything. She also swears to God. Everybody swears to God, right? So, and then he squints, he says, look me in the eye. Really, we're doing this, the look me in the eye thing? Okay, what difference? He's been looking at you guys in the eyes, the nose, the face the whole time, the hair, whatever. What difference does it make? But he makes it seem like, no, this is a good man who believes in God and will look you in the eye. That is not remotely dispositive. My question is, will he look the FBI in the eye, okay? Will he say, hey, there's two guys who say that they did it. I just told you I didn't do it. For God's sake, get the FBI to look those guys in the eye and figure out if one of them did it. I don't know how you would do it, but the FBI is pretty good at this. Yeah. So it's just really silly theatrics on the part of John Kennedy there.
Right. I want to go back to Kamala Harris's line of questioning and in particular, her very specific questions regarding the FBI investigation. And again, this was yet another opportunity for Kavanaugh to reinforce what he claimed in his opening testimony, which is that he is willing to allow for investigation. Okay, so you said that in your opening testimony. It appears that you lied in your opening testimony because you've been asked on multiple occasions during this hearing whether or not you will allow the FBI to do this investigation, and you will not answer the question.
So 2 points there. One is I thought that it was obvious that he contradicted himself by saying in the opening testimony that he wanted the FBI to investigate. They ask him and then he says no over and over again. He won't say no, but he clearly, as Kamala Harris showed, doesn't want to say yes. He doesn't want the FBI investigation. Crystal clear from not just Kamala Harris's questioning, but Dick Durbin's and Chris Coons and all those Democratic senators. But I hadn't thought of it the way that Anna just put it, which is, well, you said you wanted one and apparently you don't. Is that a third case of perjury? And so, but even if you say, hey, look, that's just a misunderstanding and not a lie,
How is it a misunderstanding? How is it a misunderstanding?
He said in the opening testimony that he wanted the FBI to investigate. They said, okay, let's do it. And don't worry about the elections. We'll do it in a week. It will still be a month away from the elections. Well, not so much, right? But the second point is arguably more important, which is the substance of it. But why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you? So Kamala Harris was super, super clear. Don't tell me about, oh, the FBI just gathers information and they don't come to a conclusion. We've already heard that all day long. We know, and Senator Harris is asking, I would like to get that information before I vote. So that's why I want the FBI to look into it. And they might even clear your name. But do you want that information? That's all I need the answer to. Do you want that information? And his answer was, in essence, no.
So we got to take a break, but when we come back, I want to show you some of those interactions regarding senators asking for the investigation and how Kavanaugh has responded, how Grassley has interrupted to prevent Kavanaugh from responding. So let's take a quick break. We'll have those videos and more.